Welcome in to the Everything Guide to Sports Betting Football Contest Strategies Special. I am Brady Kannon along with James Salinas, and we get ready to take you through the next hour of football contest strategy information because it is indeed contest season. We will speak with a number of people well-versed on the topic of football contests. Josh Applebaum, Johnny Avello, Gil Alexander, Amal Shah, and Matt Meiselman will all join and share their insights and experience. James, happy contest season to you. I always love landing on this spot this time of year because it serves as a reminder that we both have these sparkly new ostentatious rings from when we won the Hilton Super Contest. Show your bling there, my friend, Mr. Salinas.
Right here. Love to see it, Brady. Kudos to you as well, my man. It's a little heavy for me. It's not something that I wear regularly. And for my wife, I'm not much of a jewelry guy, so this one's usually boxed in a window here with the kind of our trophy case. I have a tattoo of our wedding ring, but when it comes to this, yeah, this was, let's say it's the second most special ring I have in the house.
Yeah, I don't wear it a lot, but it's nice to have in the drawer on occasion to bring it out. Let's begin with a little bit of contest history, and I will start with you first. When did you get started, James? Do you play in multiple contests each year? Give us a little bit of a look into the James Salinas contest timeline.
We'll go back to 2015 in the Super Contest. That was the very first year I played any kind of football contest in Las Vegas, and that was the year that I won first place. And that, thinking back in 2015, I had heard about it the year before. I think I was reading an article by our own VSiN staff writer, Dave Tooley. He was working for ESPN at the time, and he was kind of following week to week of where the leaderboard was, and it was something that I saw. I hadn't heard of it before, and I saw that. Was like, that's for me. I've got to get involved with that. I'm all over that. I'm going to play in that next year, and absolutely that's what I did. I came out, flew out to Las Vegas in 2015, went out by myself. It was just me, and that's really kind of my process anyway. I'm very decisive, and I don't really rely on too many others to help me along with making picks, and so I did, and I played it. And that first year that I played in 2015, you get in, there was maybe 1,800 contestants in the contest that year, Brady, and when you get in, you think, why not me? I'm going to take a shot. I'll lay my $1,500 out there, and we'll see what happens. And then for me, come week 6, after week 6, I'm at the top of the leaderboard. I look at the standing and like, wow, I am actually leading the entire field right now. And that's when the grind began. So the first year I played the contest, 2015, Brady, was the first year that I won it.
Wow. I did not know it was your rookie campaign, a debut winner. That is very cool. I actually began playing about 15, 16 years ago. I always knew the prestige of the contest, and some friends of mine invited me to be on their team. It was a team of 5 actually that year, and we did one pick per person and played with that team for a couple years. We actually won the mini contest, the last 3-week contest, kind of a subset that the Westgate used to have. And then after a few years, I kind of decided, I wanted to build a stronger team, and I invited some new friends to the table. And we did that for a few years. And then in 2011, hit the perfect storm. And you talked about having 1,800 or so, entries into the contest in 2015. Ours was back in 2011, a team victory. And we had the most ever participants in the contest at that time, which was 517. So your prize for first place, a lot bigger than mine, James. But, ever since then, really, we hit a record percentage, an all-time high for the contest at the time of 72.5%. Ever since then, we've been just treading water right around 50%. But whether it be Circa, Westgate, what have you, I just love the contest, making the picks, sweating the games, and obviously in 2015 for yourself and 2011 for me, an incredible experience indeed.
Absolutely. And I think that's where, after the first year, I think when you win it, and you've been there before, when you win it, there's exhilaration and there's also a sense of relief. And that's what I felt more so than anything else, was glad to be done with it, because I think that's the one thing you think about. The novelty of being in the contest kind of wears off maybe after that first quarter, week 3, week 4, week 5. And then you see that it's a grind, and it's 17 weeks to get to the end. Now this year we'll have 18 weeks. And I think we've seen seen over the last 6 years since 2015, I've had other success within the Super Contest, had some success with Circa Millions the first year they came out as well. That there's rivals, there's business out there, and that makes it better for us. It's a bettor's market, let's per se here for us that get into contests. And now we've seen that strategies have changed, and we'll be able to get into strategies of how things have evolved from when I played and when you played back in the day, from 2015 to where it is now going into 2021. You talked about the mini contest that you had won previously with the Super Contest, and now those mini contests have really expanded, the quarterly prizes.
Right.
So many opportunities to get in there and compete, and that's what I love about this. It's a full season. To me, it's a competitive endeavor. I love the competition.
Yeah, you're no doubt about it. There is business competition here in town, and that has resulted in the Westgate lowering their price. Used to be $1,500, as you noted. Now it's $1,000, the same as Circa. And the quarterly prizes no longer have the mini contest at the end, but a number of different ways to win. And I do believe that the competition between businesses has spawned that type of, contest developments that we've seen in the last couple of seasons here. So absolutely, that is good for us bettors and us contest players. James, let's talk about some of the do's and don'ts. And one of the first ones that came to my mind was I do not play the Thursday night NFL games. And I think the reason is pretty obvious, and maybe not if you're new to the contest, but if you play the Thursday night game, you have to turn in all 5 of your picks at that time. So that's difficult. Also, if you're turning in your picks on, say, Thursday afternoon or what have you before kickoff, you've got all the way until Sunday for injuries to happen, changes at quarterback, whatever it is. And now in this day and age, COVID concerns. So I don't like to turn in my picks so early where I'm committed to all 5 picks on a Thursday, James.
I'm right there with you. That is a big don't. That's the number one don't for me as well, really. Don't play the Thursday because I don't want to commit all 5 plays. That's 20%. And you may love a Thursday game, and those happen, and you think it's a great spot, but that's just one of the 5 selections. And for me, the key is I value more information than I do just one play. So thinking about the value of information, you mentioned last year with the COVID protocols and players being pulled out last minute and testing all these kind of things, games being moved around, rescheduled. To me, information is key, and that's been my practice, and it's evolved over the years playing in the contest. But for me, yeah, absolutely. Thursday games are a no-no in my book.
James, of course, I play on a team. You play as an individual, and we had kind of some team rules. And another one of those rules was we didn't play the London games. And it's a little bit similar to the Thursday situation, but I think the information isn't as readily available with London games. There's the travel. I think there's some weird intangibles that are very tough to handicap about the London games. Of course, on the West Coast, we're watching those at 6 a.m. It's the travel time for these guys. Sometimes, we have the Las Vegas Raiders that went from the Pacific time zone all the way out east, or to London, rather. So I just think there's more uncertainty with the London games, and we have, for many occasions, avoided those as well.
London, I wouldn't say I've avoided them totally, but for the most part, it's very rare that I will play one of those London games. Or in this case, too, we have some other international games. There was a Mexico game a few years ago, and usually I'll tend to stay away from those just because there's part of the handicap. We think about home field advantage. We also think about travel, all those types of things that play into it, and it's hard to kind of figure out when it comes to, is there a home field advantage? I remember Jacksonville was one of the teams that was consistently going over to London. It felt like they had a pretty good fan base out there in England that was following them. But aside from that, yeah, I'm right there with you, Brady. Rarely will I play the international games, especially the London games.
The other one I thought of, and we see this quite often, more than a handful of times during the regular season in the NFL. And of course, for people unfamiliar, the contest line comes out on Wednesday, and it is stale. Of course, that line could move quite a bit between that Wednesday release and Sunday morning. And my advice is don't always immediately just jump to where the line move advantage is. You never know, and I've seen it backfire quite often.
And that can be a strategy for some folks that look at and they get that closing line value and feel like with the static lines, they get a better number than where it is going to close. And you can play it to that extent. Sometimes I'll do that. It's very rare on occasion that I'll do that. Again, for me, it's all about information. I'm trying to make sure, and we know when it comes to injuries in the NFL, that it's so volatile, it's so fluid, and really getting good information on player availability, that is so much more important to me than trying to get ahead of any other kind of game that I might be able to find that I feel like I have one edge on. To me, it's all about player information for the most part and matchups, and it's very situational. So I think looking at lines, I tend to be more of a dog player, Brady, honestly, and so if I'm looking at lines, if I feel like I'm getting the better of a number on a plus side with an underdog, then that might be something I'll look at. But when it comes to favorites and trying to get a better number, that's usually something that I'll stay away from as well.
All right, we want to bring in our first guest. We welcome in Matt Meiselman of DraftKings. He is a contest specialist with DraftKings to tell us a little bit about the DraftKings Championship Series. You can follow him on Twitter at Preaching Sense. Matt, what about the contest you've got running over there at DraftKings? Welcome to the program, my friend.
Thanks. Glad to be here with you guys. And yeah, for all of the stuff on Championship Series, you can go to DraftKings.com/championship-series. It's a really exciting time of the year. We have so many contests that are about to get underway. So you guys already talked about Survivor and Pick'em. We just had our Fantasy Golf World Championship, and the Fantasy Baseball World Championship is starting just 2 days before NFL season. And then we have a host of other fantasy-related football contests throughout the year going into the playoffs even. So there's just a ton happening. I'm sure most people watching this right now are very excited for football to start. I'm excited for it. And there's just so many different ways to get involved.
Matt, so you talk about that. We know NFL is king when it comes to us bettors, and at least definitely for us contest players. And thinking about the contest there, you talked about the Survivor and the Pick'em. Give us a little insight into the Pick'em, where it's been, what you've been able to do, and how it's grown from when you started to where it is now going into the 2021 season.
So it's been pretty big for a while now, but it's obviously expanding with more states that can bet on sports. So we now have Colorado, Tennessee, Virginia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, New Jersey, and West Virginia that can all get involved. So the contest is obviously growing as a result of just more people that have the access to it. But you don't actually have to be from any of those states. You just have to be there to make your picks. But even so, just more places to be able to get your picks in does help to grow the contest. To me, it's going to be a little bit of a unique year. We have now an extra week in the season. So last year, for example, with the 16 weeks, the Pick'em contest, your picks only needed to encompass 14 of the weeks. So it was 14 out of 16 for a total of 70. Now we're doing 16 out of 17 for a total of 80. So I think that may make it a little bit more difficult. But it does seem like there's a new wrinkle every year, especially last year, of course. With all the different things that you mentioned, like postponements, cancellations, games getting rescheduled. So we'll see how much that affects the contest this year, but it does seem to be growing. That's a pretty obvious increasing trend.
Matt, you have a couple of other contests there at DraftKings, the Sports Betting National Championship and the Daily Fantasy World Series. Can you tell us about those two a little bit?
I'm personally really excited for Sports Betting National Championship. I wasn't at DraftKings yet for the last one, which was 2 years ago. But one of the things that we're trying to do with Champ Series is to pit the best of the best against each other. And while I really enjoy the way that DFS sets up in this way, where you can see people setting up their lineups in a way where they're not just competing against a field of your usual DFS players, they're competing against other pros. But with the sports betting event, it's a weekend where you have to continuously make decisions in real time. With DFS, your lineups lock, and then maybe in certain sports you have late swap where there's 1 or 2 additional decisions to make. But with sports betting, you're placing bets through the whole weekend, and you're following the leaderboard, and you're trying to do the game theory element. So to me, a sports betting tournament like this kind of combines the elements of DFS and sports betting that I think people love so much. So personally, I just really can't wait to be there and see how it unfolds and just see how people strategize around this thing.
I think it's great. You have, of course, the College Basketball National Championship, the U.S. Open, Golf's National Championship. Of course, we got to have a Sports Betting National Championship as well. Matt, we will talk to you a little bit later in the program. Thank you very much, sir.
Of course. Talk to you soon.
All right. That is Matt Meiselman with DraftKings, the contest specialist for DraftKings. And James, you've got access right there in Colorado. Are you going to get involved in any of these as well?
As far as I think with the pick'em, the pro pick'em, absolutely. I think those are it's very similar in structure to the Super Contest and what Circa Millions is doing. And I think one of the things we'll be able to get into more of that contest. We'll be able to get into some of the rules. I think we've seen each and every year some of the rules are modified. We talked about the with the Super Contest and Circa Millions. If you play that Thursday game, you have to put in all 5 selections. Well, that's not the case with DraftKings. If you play in the DraftKings Pro Pick'em tournament, you can play a Thursday game, but that's one of your selections. They'll take, I think, believe the deadline is right up until first kickoff on Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon, that first round of games. So depending on where you live, whether that's 1 o'clock Eastern time or here in Colorado, it'll be 11 o'clock Mountain time. I love the fact that you can have those deadlines pushed back further and further, just more time to gather information.
That is really amazing. So I'm guessing that the deadline is maybe an hour before kickoff or something like that. And so you could turn in all 5 picks basically at 10 a.m. Mountain Time, you're saying, James?
Yes,
On
and
a
I
Sunday.
think the key. Absolutely. And I think the key for that, at least for somebody like me who really digs into, we talk about injury reports, practice reports. Also, it's 90 minutes every game for the NFL. 90 minutes prior to kickoff is when the inactive reports come out. And we know there's a lot of propaganda and a lot of coach speak that goes on with player availability, and you got to read between the lines with those things. But until you actually see that the reports come out of who's active and who isn't, now you know for sure. And with 90 minutes to go prior to kickoff, and the fact that the deadline will extend past that, that's a great advantage for folks that really want to know about player availability for that particular game.
Absolutely an advantage, and something people in those jurisdictions really need to take a hard look at. That is quite a rule change there for DraftKings that really is advantageous to the players. So kudos to DraftKings, and good luck to you, James Salinas, in those contests there in the Mile High City. I want to talk about another do and don'ts here. We were going through some contest strategies in that regard, and I try to mix up my selections with my team a little bit. You play as an individual, I play on a team, and with my teammates, we all have a little bit of a different style of handicapping. You said you typically gravitate towards underdogs. If you're just a single player and you just kind of adhere to one style with all 5 of your picks, you could have a Hall of Fame season and hit 60%. 60% doesn't win contests. Do you find yourself, James, maybe trying to mix up the plays a little bit with, rather than just going across the board with one type of pick?
Absolutely. And for the most part, I would say if I was going to put a number to it, I'd say maybe it's 65 to 70% of underdogs is what I play. That means there'll be 30 to 35% of favorites in there. Now, are they going to be the big favorites? I'm not laying big wood when it comes to the NFL. Don't want to get covered on the back door against me. So I think you have to mix it up. And I think you have to take it week by week. And that's where I think biases play in. And so there's a lot of don'ts that I apply to when it comes to my contest strategy, where I'm just looking, if it's week 1, week 4, I'm not looking back. I'm always looking forward. I'm staying within the moment because I don't want to, in a sense, hold grudges. I don't want to hold grudges against teams. Maybe they cost me a game last week or 2 weeks ago. I'm coming in fresh each and every week. That's really my style, and it's got to be situational. So yeah, there's not one particular way that for me as a contest player I'm going to play, whether it's favorites or dogs. It's each week is its own entity.
Let's now check in with Josh Applebaum and get his thoughts. VSiN's sports betting reporter. Josh.
Betting on the NFL is king, and everybody continues to look at, obviously, each game individually, but there are other ways to bet the NFL, looking at survivor pools, looking at ATS, pick contests. Obviously, Circa has one of the best around here, and they get a ton of entries. It's a fun way to bet in a different regard, not just betting the individual game. So a couple suggestions and just tips that I would offer. Number one, having a contrarian mindset. I think if you want to win your pool, whether it's a picks pool, whether it's a survivor pool, if you do what everyone else is doing, you're not going to differentiate yourself. If you just go with the chalk plays and what everyone is expecting to do, and you kind of fall into the herd mentality, you're never really going to separate yourself. So, one suggestion that I would look at when it comes to survivor pools, whether you do ESPN, Yahoo, or any of these big public pools, a lot of times what they'll do is they'll show you the percentages of each team and what they're being picked. So, like, let's say the Chiefs, and again, I would also look at lines and what the odds are for each team. Let's just say the Chiefs are -10 against some team, and then maybe you have the Ravens -10 against another team. Everyone's taking the Chiefs because of Mahomes, and if you look at whether it's ESPN, Yahoo, or any of these, these contests, they're going to show you 80% of bets or 80% of entries are on Kansas City. maybe only 20% are on the Ravens. If they're the same odds, -10 both, to me, going contrarian and not taking what the play that everyone else is taking can really benefit you. It also allows you to save some of your good teams down the stretch. Again, some people just say survive in advance, but if you really want to win your pool, think differently and kind of save some of these good teams for down the stretch that you can use in your back pocket. When everyone else is scrambling, you have some good teams left for you. But to me, dogs in the NFL, dogs with sharp line moves, contrarian dogs, divisional dogs, that's where I would go. So wishing you the best of luck. Hope you win your pool. And just remember, think differently. If you want to win this, you can't just bet with the crowd. You're really not going to make any hay doing it that way.
Great stuff there, Mr. Applebaum, and of course the author of the Everything Guide to Sports Betting. This is the Everything Guide to Sports Betting, the Football Contest Strategies edition. James Salinas and Brady Kannon with you, talking about some of the do's and don'ts in football contest strategy. And I was also mentioning in my list that I made up here for the program, James, if you do play on a team, I think you really have to be careful about how you put your team together. You need to select guys that you have confidence in and that you trust, because you're not going to get there and into an argument every week. You have to have faith in one another.
And for you, Brady, that being able to find that, I think for me, it would be a challenge to do that. Now, I'm in a different scenario here. I'm not around a lot of sports bettors. Sports betting didn't come legal here in Colorado until just this past year. It doesn't mean things weren't going on, for entertainment purposes only, my friend. But ultimately, for me, it's a whole different world. And I think the biggest thing for me is being decisive. You can talk yourself into games. You can talk yourself out of games. So you tell me, Brady, when you guys have a crew like that, do you guys talk yourselves in and or out of certain selections?
Well, we will get to that later in the program, but you bring up a great point there. I'm around guys that have been around sports betting their whole lives, not necessarily the case in Colorado. When we come back, we'll talk with Gil Alexander and Amal Shah right here on the Everything Guide to Sports Betting, the Football Contest Strategy Show. Welcome back to the Everything Guide to Sports Betting, the Football Contest Strategy Edition. Brady Kannon and James Salinas with you, a couple of former Westgate Super Contest winners. I can never stop saying that, or congratulations to you, Mr. Salinas. You, of course, in 2015, myself in 2011. But I tell you what, James, you and I are not the only ones here at VSiN who have experienced contest success. Let's talk to our man, Gil Alexander, who made Kreider 1 in the Circa Survivor contest last season.
Thank you, Brady. Survivor is my favorite thing in the whole world. I prefer playing it, quite frankly, over against the spread contest. The main thing I would sort of impart to new Survivor players is that the game is misnamed. The object is not to survive. The object is to win. And I think that's the first sort of pitfall of Survivor. People are so focused on just surviving the whole way through, and they don't apply game theory. So let's not get cute about that, though, either. I do think that the first 5 or 6 weeks of the NFL season, you should play to survive in advance. You hear a lot of stories about people who map out their entire 18 weeks or beyond now in this case, where, they decide, well, this is who I'm going to play every single week. But even the best NFL handicapper doesn't know exactly how good or bad teams are before the season starts. So I would say play it conservatively the first 5 or 6 weeks to survive in advance. Learn just how good some teams are and how bad others are and how unpredictable most teams are in the middle. Then at that point, if you're lucky enough to get through that first stretch of the season, then I think you apply game theory. And what I mean by that is no longer play to survive in advance. Figure out a couple things big time, which is one, know the rules of your pool. That's the first thing you need to know. So take, for instance, the Circa Survivor contest. You have to know that there's a Thanksgiving rule. You have to save one of those teams at least during Thanksgiving week. And there's a Christmas quirk where you have to save at least one team for Christmas. Every Survivor pool has its own little unique rules. That's the first thing you have to know. The second thing is get a handle on what everyone else in the remaining pool on a given week, what they are more likely to play than you would be. Be contrarian. Perfect example. Let's use a bizarre one. If the Cowboys are favored over Washington by 17 points and you believe that 99% of the people in your pool, just to use an extreme example, are going to take the Cowboys, don't play them. Play Washington. Play to win. Play to stave off everybody else and to win that thing as quickly as you can. Those are just some of the general things. There's some myths about not playing division games, which doesn't really bear out in the historical data. But those are the main things you need to know to be a successful Survivor player.
I love it. Great stuff from Gil Alexander. We're now going to talk to another VSiN colleague who really, I believe, has a very different strategy than that of Gil, and that is Amal Shah, who had equal success to Mr. Alexander last year. Amal?
Thanks, Brady. I can't wait for this year's Survivor contest. Got to Week 15 last year, got bounced by the Pittsburgh Steelers in a division road game against Cincinnati. I kind of went against everything I believe in. I try to avoid road teams as much as possible, but sometimes you have no option. The real obstacle this year is going to be the Thanksgiving Day games. You have 3 of them. They're going to be extremely challenging. And then remember, there's 2 Christmas Day games along with a Thursday night game, which you have to select from. So that's going to be the real challenge in this year's Survivor contest. If you can navigate those and try and find the easiest matchups, particularly in those games, you're going to have a great chance to survive in advance. You're looking to find the simplest game. All you have to do is win. When you win by 1 or 100, it doesn't make a difference. You move on. But again, the goal is to see if you can find the game that you're going to potentially win by a large margin so you don't have to sweat it out too much. And then you want to put yourself in a position to be able to hedge. These are easy hedges because you're taking teams on the money line on the opposite side. So a great opportunity in this contest.
Very interesting to hear both of those strategies. Thank you very much to Amal Shah and Gil Alexander. And James, Gil specifically talked about not necessarily mapping out your entire season and where you want to go. Amal, I believe, does employ that strategy. And I don't know if he adheres to it 100%, but he does kind of set out a schedule as he approaches a Survivor contest.
I think you can do that and then know that you have to have the ability to adapt and adjust based on injuries. We saw last year with COVID protocols, games being moved around. We had games on Wednesdays. So you can script it out, but then you also have to have the ability to scrap it, what you've scripted, and be able to adjust based on whatever looks like from an injury standpoint or even a scheduling standpoint.
And it was interesting that Gil Alexander pointed out as well, you need to know the rules, and Amal pointed that out as well with the Christmas and the Thanksgiving quirks in the contest. You really have to pay attention on deadlines. And you mentioned, the COVID was switching to a Wednesday. There were certain situations in 2020 where you could lose a game if it moved to a certain day or was not postponed or replayed by a certain time. We'll come back and join Johnny Avello and get his thoughts on more DraftKings contests when we return right here at VSiN. Welcome into the Everything Guide to Sports Betting, the football contest strategy special. Brady Kannon and James Salinas with you, talking football contest strategy. And Johnny Avello now joins the program. He is the sportsbook director for DraftKings. Johnny, thank you so much for joining the show. And you've been at this racket a long time. I think I first met you way back when you were at Wynn Las Vegas. And if you go back to that time, there was maybe 2-3 contests in Las Vegas. Now we have sports betting all over the country. We have contests all over the country. This has really become a phenomenon, the contest, and it's kind of like betting a little to win a lot, and that phenomenon that sports bettors often latch on to. What can you tell us about the evolution of contests and what you're offering now at DraftKings?
Well, Brady and James, first of all, thank you guys for doing a show like this on contests. I think it's fabulous. the contests aren't known really, although we know there's a couple thousand people get them every year. They're really not known in the wide world of sports betting because people around the country, some of them don't know about these contests where you can win a lot of money. I've done my share of contests, at Wynn and in Las Vegas. And I can tell you one thing about contests is that when you first launch them, don't expect it to be a hit in year one. It takes time. It takes time for the people that enter your contest to have confidence in you that you're going to be around for a second and third contest. And so they need to see how your contest evolves and how it goes the first and second year. So contests take time. It takes time to build up that confidence from the general public. On our contest at DraftKings, this is only our second year doing it. We have two. We have the traditional, pick the pros contest 5 games a week, and we had the Survivor contest. And we took our lumps last year, didn't have the enrollment we wanted. This year is much better, and there's some reasons for that. I think that that separates us from the other contests. But I love them. There's a lot of money in the pot, and I wished others out there. I wish they'd get in, and I wish them good luck.
Johnny, you mentioned money in the pot. Well, let's go to your Pro Football Millionaire Pick'em contest that is going this year. We're going to start in just about 2 weeks. What is the prize pool for that? Because I think you've got a pretty hefty guarantee in that contest.
We do, and it's $1 million to the winner. That thing has $4 million in guaranteed prize money, and it's in 9 states. This is the first time a contest has been done outside of one state. Those states we are in are New Jersey, New Hampshire, West Virginia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Colorado, Tennessee, Virginia. There's one, and Iowa. That's the last one. And what we've done what makes our contest a little bit different is there's 3 things. We're in multiple states. You get 1 bye week, which other contests don't normally do. You have to play every week. So we give you a week. If you don't like the slate or you're on vacation, can't play, you get that 1 week as a bye. And the third thing that makes it different is that you can put in your selections at different times. If you want to play the Thursday night game and then you want to play the Sunday games, you can put them in at just about post time. If you want to make a change, you can make a change on your selection. So I think those 3 things what separates us from other contests.
That's awesome, Johnny. That is so player friendly. I mean, can you imagine having a bye week, James, and being able to turn your picks in at staggered times of the week? That is, like I say, very player friendly, and I think progressive on the part of DraftKings. Johnny, I think it's also fascinating that you have participation from 9 different states across the country, and I imagine that's only going to grow in future years. What kind of participation have you seen? I imagine this has got to be off the charts with people from all over the country being able to jump in.
Well, there's still a few weeks to go, and we're over 1,000 in both. The last I looked, the Survivor was around 1,100, and the Pick'em was just short of that. One other thing to mention about these contests, guys, is, with COVID lurking as it is, there could be some games that are postponed. And in our contest, it says that, if a game is canceled, the selection is counted as a loss. That is very key. When this part about changing your selections is very key, because you'll know if a game is going to be canceled and you'll be able to change that selection. So it's very important to be on top of things on that Sunday morning in case there is a cancellation.
Johnny, let's talk about championships. And both Brady and I, we've won the Super Contest. So in a sense, we have been contest champions. Back a few years ago, 2018, you guys offered the Sports Betting National Championship out there in New Jersey. I actually went out and partook. That was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun that whole weekend. Can you tell us a little bit about that contest and what that looks like, when that's going to be held? And will that still be in New Jersey, or will that also be something that you can do intrastate?
That was a great event, guys. I really enjoyed that. And thanks for coming to that. Our plan was to have this championship series and tie in all the daily fantasy contests because we have $1 million winners on fantasy every year, and we have sports contests and tie it all into one big championship. Now, COVID kind of put a little bit of a wrench into that strategy. Now, we're still doing it. We're doing we had our fantasy contest throughout the year. In sports, we've had a couple of little ones. Our plan is to still have a big one, but we can't predict what's going to happen with COVID. Now, once COVID is out of the way, it's just full steam ahead for us. We're looking at just blowing this thing out of the water.
Johnny, when is the Sports Betting National Championship coming up this year?
Don't have a date yet. We were planning on sometime in September. That got moved to October. Now it may get moved a little later than that. Could be November, December. So I'll keep you guys abreast of when that is going to happen.
We'll take it as a Christmas present, Johnny. How about that?
That's great. I like that.
Put a Sports Betting National Championship invitation in my stocking. Johnny, great to catch up with you as always, and best of luck on all the DraftKings contests.
Thanks, Brady. Thanks, James.
All right, Johnny Avello, the sportsbook director for DraftKings. And James, you mentioned you were going to enter one of those contests, the one that is akin to the Super Contest or the Circa Millions, being provided by DraftKings there in the state of Colorado. Are you going to go back to the Sports Betting National Championship whenever that does arrive?
Well, let's see if I can win this, because I think if I can win this, depending on when that goes out, if you win their pick'em contest, you get an automatic buy-in, you get an automatic seat to go to the Tournament of Champions. So that's one of the other incentives as well. But yeah, when that came out, when we did that a few years ago, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that'll pay for your trip, no doubt about it. When we come back, we'll rejoin Matt Meiselman of DraftKings and get some more thoughts on all of their football contests. Welcome back into the Everything Guide to Sports Betting, the Football Contest Strategy Edition. Brady Kannon and James Salinas with you here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. Wrapping up the program here, and we'll rejoin Matt Meiselman of DraftKings here shortly. James, earlier in the program, we went through some of my do's and don'ts. You and I both agree on not playing the Thursday game. Now, it might be different there in Colorado or one of the other 9 states that are participating with the DraftKings contest, because you're not tied into turning all those picks in on Thursday prior to the Sunday slate of NFL games. But I want to get to your list, and you break it down into do's and don'ts. And one of the do's specifically caught my eye. Pay attention to the full season schedule analysis every week. If you could elaborate on that, what do you mean by that?
It's a long season, and we know the NFL season is a grind. And if you think these teams, now they're going to play 17 games as opposed to 16, that's just an extra game where you're going to be able to find flat spots. You're going to be able to find scheduling spots where there's a sandwich game. And let's just break down. Think about the Rams last year, and they had a couple of these, and every team has this. And you can find flat spots in schedules as early as week 3 or week 4, look-ahead type of games. Thinking about the Rams last year, prior to their break, they started their first half of the season, their first 8 games last season. 5 of them were on the road. 4 of them were in the Eastern time zone. So a lot of travel, a lot of early starts for them, and back-to-back games where they had 5 of their last 7 games on the road prior to the bye week. That last game prior to that bye was at Miami, short week coming off from Chicago, looking ahead to that bye. They were a 3.5-point favorite in that game down in Miami, and they got totally blitzed. They scored the first touchdown, gave up 28 unanswered points after that fact, and were never in the game. So finding a flat spot like that. We also know there's sandwich games. I'll stick with the Rams, thinking about when they came off the bye. They played Seattle, Tampa, San Francisco, Arizona, New England, had Seattle and Arizona to finish up, and they had a sandwich game right in there with the New York Jets. And I think Survivor players remember that game clearly, because that was the game the Jets upset them, because that was a total sandwich game. They were not ready to play. And I think you find that week in and week out with teams just not going to be bringing their best effort on a weekly basis. basis.
That's a great point there. Look at the big picture so you can hone in on an individual week. Maybe knowing more about that team in a macro sense can allow you to hone in on a particular week, whether you're going to back or go against a particular team. Also want to take a look at a couple of the other do's you have. Take an objective perspective into each game, certainly. Kind of a why not, or anything can happen. You can't let bias creep into your selection there. And then you also say be decisive. And I totally agree with that. I can equate that to golf. You have to commit to your shot. You can't be second guessing yourself. And then finally, take care of your mentals. What do you mean by that, my friend?
This is the grind of a contest. And, the first few weeks you get in it, you're excited. We're right there. And especially if you have a good run early, let's say that first quarter, maybe you go 15-5, you're hitting 75%, and you're feeling good about yourself. Then you week 5. And now it's week 6. And you're looking for this year, we're going to have 18 weeks. It is a grind of a contest. It is such a long season. So you got to be able, like we said, take care of your mentals. Give yourself an off day. I give myself an off day. Tuesday is my off day. It's an off day away from NFL. It's an off day away from all sports on Tuesday, where I don't want to know anything that's going on. Whatever happens on a Tuesday in the NFL, you'll have plenty of time to catch up to it Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, etc. Give yourself a mental break, because it can really wear you down as the season goes on, Brady. You know this full well, especially when you're up there at the top of that leaderboard and you're competing for big prize money. You're thinking about it constantly. Each and every day, you're going to bed with it. You're waking up in the middle of the night thinking about it. First thing in the morning, you're thinking about it. You're getting information. You got to give yourself a mental break. That's what I talk about when you're talking about take care of your mentals. For me, that's what I do on Tuesday. No sports of any kind, in particular the NFL.
I think that's really a super point, James, that I had not necessarily thought of, and I kind of do put it into practice. But you mentioned that, and I'm going to take that to heart. I remember one of my teammates, when we were going through our winning season, he says, "What have you done to me? I'm going to get a divorce. I'm going to get fat because I sit on the couch all Sunday. I'm going to lose all my hair because I'm pulling it out." I mean, it is quite the stressful grind going through this season. And that is certainly a great point you make about taking a quick break every week to just, meditate and clear the head, if you will, for a minute, and that is probably healthy in the long run. Let's rejoin our friend Matt Meiselman. He is the contest specialist at DraftKings. Matt, welcome back to the program. Let's dive a little deeper into some of these contests that DraftKings has going on for this football season. I thought one very interesting bonus, we were talking with Johnny Avello, of course, the sportsbook director there at DraftKings, and he was explaining so many of the different rules, and I think they are so player-friendly and really give the players a lot of options, whether games are canceled or turning them in late and making changes. That's really a great approach. And another one here is you get a little $100 bonus if you go 5-0 one week.
Yeah, well, first off, I love that point about the mental breaks. Like, that's one of my favorite things I've heard in a while. So, yeah, that's awesome. Totally agree. But yeah, we do have this bonus for $100 free bet if you get a 5 out of 5 week in Pick'em. So I think the main point of this is just to keep people more engaged. Like, maybe you get off to a slow start where you're not out of it right away, but your season is just, it's at a point where maybe you don't feel like you have a great chance to win that contest, but you still have something to play for every week. So I think that's the main idea behind it, but it also is just a nice bonus on top. Even if you are at the top of the standings, if you put 5 out of 5 together at any point, you get something for it. So you can feel like there's a win to be had every week, regardless of what's going on in the other weeks.
Matt, we were talking about the deadlines, and the deadline in this case here for the Pro Pick'em contest is 1 o'clock Eastern time on Football Sunday, which I think is really important for those of us like myself that really want to get those inactive reports that come in 90 minutes prior to kickoff and get confirmation on whether a certain player is going to play or not suit up and be on the field. How does that work with you guys when you're being able to basically right up till kickoff is when we're talking about here in Colorado? It's 11 o'clock Mountain Time. That's when first kick is. So thinking about deadlines there, how that's expanded from last year to this year, do you feel like that is really an advantageous rule for players in your contest?
I think so, just because you have more time to make decisions. And it's kind of something that should just come naturally to DraftKings, because in daily fantasy, you have right up until the minute to make decisions whenever you play in any sort of DFS contest. So it really is just following suit with that line of thinking. And there's just so much information. You're right. Like, things happen in the last 90 minutes up to kickoff. And one of the things I'm really curious about for both of these contests, for Survivor and Pick'em, is just how the game theory works. Because when you have players playing at higher stakes, generally everyone has a pretty good understanding of what's going on. So you get this kind of multi-layered analysis where it's like, okay, the Chiefs hypothetically are a 14-point favorite. We'll save them for another week later in the season. The Bills are a 10-point favorite. Maybe we'll go there, but I think everyone might go there. So then you start moving down to like the third, fourth, fifth best choices for Survivor pool, where you may think that there's an obvious choice, and then it turns out like everyone went contrarian and no one used the obvious choice. So having extra time to game plan, I think it could create more of that, because more time to think could be just more thinking that goes on, and then you get more nuanced picks, I guess, where you kind of have people deviating from what would be expected, and then you get more of those contrarian selections.
Matt, one last question here. I want to ask you, with people being able to turn their picks in so late in the game, the contests out here, both Circa and the Westgate, they will release on Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening, the consensus picks, the results of all the selections from everybody, all the entries in the contest. Will DraftKings also do something like that? Because that could be very interesting. If you're turning in picks right before kickoff, you might be able to see and gain a little edge of what's going on in the afternoon or on a Monday night.
Yeah, I could be wrong about this, but my understanding is that everything locks at 1 o'clock. So you can pick a Thursday night game, but the last time that you can pick anything is 1 p.m. on Sunday. And then after that is when all of the publicly available data is then available, where you can see what everyone else did. So I don't think that there's the window there where you can see into what other players are doing and make your decision based on that, what you think that the popular picks are. So I do think you certainly can see the results, but not until after the 1 o'clock games start.
All right. There's a perfect example of knowing the rules. And I believe you're right. I believe I read that here in our agenda today. 1 o'clock Eastern time is the deadline period. So there wouldn't be a way you could, maneuver in the afternoon games or the later games. Matt, thank you so much, and enjoy contest season, my friend.
Of course, you too. Thanks for having me on.
That is Matt Meiselman of DraftKings. You can follow him on Twitter at Preaching Sense. And James, I want to get back to a couple of our do's and don'ts. And there's going to possibly and hopefully come a point in the season or in the contest when you are in the mix, in the money, and you have to start thinking about possibly hedging or maybe making opposite picks of what you think your competitors might do. You have to certainly strategize when you get down into the thick of it, into the last 4 or 5, half dozen weeks. And executing something like that and thinking about it are really two different things. I can tell you, when we won it, we thought about it, we didn't necessarily adhere to it. What about you? If you're presented with that type of situation, how do you address that?
Brady, I've had a couple situations like that over the last few years. When I won it, I was way ahead, and it wasn't a concern for me. I was going to win it in that final week. I was so far ahead of the field. But the second year, came in third. There was some contrarian play going on in there. And then in 2018, when I came in 26th, I played the late game, and I went completely contrarian. It was Tennessee was at home getting points because Gabbert was the quarterback, and they were going against Indy. And basically, it was the wild card game. Whoever won was going to get into the wild card spot. I went contrarian because I was going for the top 10. Now, I didn't work out, and I didn't win, and I ended up being in 26, but there was some contrarian play. I think the other piece, too, Brady, is not only for the full season, but also think about all the quarterly contests that are in there, and both with the Super Contest of what they've done, different quarterly prizes, same thing with Circa Millions. Did that a couple years ago where I put myself in a position to be able to capitalize on a hedge, play it late. Always play. If you have an opportunity to play in those quarterlies, and you might win those, got to have an out. Put yourself on that Monday night football game, and you can hedge the other side. That's what I did, and took down a nice prize pool.
All right. He is James Salinas. James, always great to talk football contest with you. Thank you so much. Always a big, happening here in Las Vegas, Super Contest weekend and everything about it. Everybody's fired up. It's like the beginning of the football season. There's hope that we can do it again. My friend, I'll talk with you throughout the NFL season, and best of luck to you, James.
Same to you, Brady. Good luck this year.
All right, that's going to do it. The Everything Guide to Sports Betting, the Football Contest Strategy Edition, right here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.